Hello there and welcome to another Stompy51 miniature adventure. Who says I never paint anything? This week we dive into the Wild West and I pull out some painted miniatures I did the other Saturday from Wargames Foundry, Black Scorpion Miniatures and Brigade Games. And so what do the Dead Man's Hand rules tell us about the potential use of civilians in game? Townsfolk are non-combatants that just end up getting themselves killed, but they sure make your gaming table look pretty. That's very callous. Townsfolk do not move until the shooting starts. Some faction cards or abilities allow townsfolk to be moved or used. Now that's good to know that they are potentially actively involved, because in Dracula's America, they were only basically hostages, which was a bit silly. You know, if you imagine a computer game where you just pick up a token and the token just gives you some kind of, cover, that's not really correlating with the role of townsfolk in a Midwest town, Old West town. When the first shot is fired within 30 centimeters of any townsfolk, they are smart enough to move 10 centimeters to cover or directly away from the shooter. They will continue to move until they are outside 30 centimeters or they go into a building or other suitable cover. Fair enough. If you feel there is a logical reason for one of these frightened citizens to move in an alternative way, feel free to do so. If a character enters a building with townsfolk in it, they may herd them out of the building. Why would they want to do that? Townsfolk may be shot at or engage in hand-to-hand combat if you're into that sort of thing, and they do seem to have their own stat line. I mean, it's not a really good use of your crew if you've got some kind of objective, but hey, if a townsfolk obscures a shot aimed at an opposing character and that shot misses, the townsfolk takes an under fire marker, probably through sheer terror. And if you remember, there's a kind of mashup between the tokens that you put down in bolt action pins and just hit points. So it's all kind of merged into one. And the more of these fire markers you take, between 3 and 5, depending on how nails you are, well then you're out. Some scenes have different roles for townsfolk, and it's encouraged to create your own place for these citizens in scenes. Most importantly, townsfolk populating your gaming town just looks great. So do you know what? That's, I suppose, the real reason why I've done this. Drunken townsfolk are represented by an individual or a pair and have the same profile as above, but unsurprisingly, they act and move differently. At the start of each turn, roll a d10 to determine the direction they move, with the direction indicated by the facing of the upper dice point. The score shown on the roll is the number of centimeters the sozzled fool is moved. Do you know what? That's all good. Right, so who have I actually got? So a number of these are from the Brigade Games homage to Deadwood, which I watched in the early 2000s and was great fun. And there was some priest who was always carrying on. Let's see if we can get this in focus. I mean, the light in this room is not great, but then again, it's the UK, and so the light out there isn't great either. Can I do anything about this? Probably not. So he's extolling the virtues of the Lord. Nothing wrong with that. And I used contrast paints, but something weird seems to have happened. There seem to be like little scratches all over these models, and I don't know if it's because the contrast paint just naturally scratches, even though it's a Halford's car underspray, a grey kind of undercoat they use on cars, and I've always found it to be quite effective because it sort of absolutely adheres to the miniature, and then anything that you paint over it gets kind of sucked into that Halford's grey undercoat. But it doesn't seem to have worked with contrast paint. She's from the same range, an entrepreneur in the sphere of entertainment, alongside her, who looks more like the Madame of the venture. And if you hold her up to another entrepreneur from the Coppleston Old West range by Foundry from the late 90s, early 2000s, they do match perfectly well. And he's the mayor, I think. He's the minion in Deadwood of Swinton. I can't remember his name, the name of the bad guy. But that's the bad guy, the kind of mafia boss. And I found it quite strange. I'm sure these are by Paul Hicks, but let's get into focus. That side of his face doesn't seem to have any beard sculpted on. I don't know if he just kind of forgot. I could have done a little bit of green stuffing and painted it up, or just painted it, but I just thought I can't be bothered, because one principle of painting all of these was keep it very, very, very simple. Can you see this little scratch over there? I don't know if it's because when I varnished these, maybe I varnished it too roughly and the paintbrush kind of just scraped off bits and bobs of the paint. But I think that's the thing you've got to do when you paint civilians, because they are effectively scenery. And there's only so much effort you want to spend on it, otherwise you'll never get it all done. And they look all right. And then I thought, I can't remember if one of the storylines was that, you know, his aggressive, psychotic boss who loves wielding a knife had kind of shaved off half of his beard just to show him who was boss. And he always looked kind of like he was about to get beaten up, which is why he's holding his hat between his hands, looking slightly anxious. And then there was the doctor trying to do good across Deadwood in the face of all manner of exigencies and just general trouble. And he's pretty good. And then I got I bought one pack of Black Scorpion miniatures Old West when they were still metal, so this is like 15 years ago, to make Malifaux proxies with. And this one I never got around to painting, and they are a tad taller and bulkier than most 28mm, but the thing is, some people are quite big and tall, and he's come out quite successfully, I think. Although you could ask, why is he broomsticking the grass and sand of an area outside of one of the Deadwood buildings? But hey, you know, his hair's gone white, maybe he's just starting to lose it a bit, you know. He's not a great debater on stage either. And then we have four señoritas. Actually, some of them might not be señoritas, they might be señoras, who look very cobblestone to me and are clearly Wargames Foundry from their Old West range. And I used the black again for the hair, the contrast paint black by Games Workshop, and again it seems to have slightly scratched. But they look perfectly alright, perfectly serviceable. If I wanted to, I could go back and dot the eyes, but I'm not sure I can be bothered, because one of the principles of these is knowing when to stop. I was on a call for work the other day, and there was basically the perfect way of doing it, and this very technical expert was trying to tell us, no, we could do this, we could check this, and I was like, look, we were basically saying it's going to cost however many more thousands of pounds, and there is no appetite for that, and it's just not necessary. So we're going to have to just skate over this in a way that does the job, because we have to balance doing a perfect job against what our scope of work is really, and our budget. But there you go. And then there's this one, which always makes me slightly sad, because it sort of seems to reflect the tough nature of life at the time. Not everyone has running water in their home. And that's why sometimes it's more fun to just play with orcs and goblins, because there's no real moral quandary with what you're representing. But look, this is just an Old West representation of the many films we all watched as kids. Although I'm sure those films have all got much grittier as times have gone on. Perhaps as people have recognised the reality of the tough life that was the Old West. It wasn't just running around on a horse taking pot shots at people. And that's a group shot, so you can kind of see them all standing on top of each other with a reasonable size comparison. The Foundry and the Brigade games entirely in keeping with one another, and one Black Scorpion guy happily interspersed. And we'll leave it there for this week, But apropos of nothing, I thought I would share something entertaining I saw on one of the Facebook groups. This isn't mine. Someone painted this quite fun Empire Pistolier. And so someone commented, he seems like he's ill. And the guy who painted it says, well, please elaborate. What are you on about? And the guy wrote, mate, his skin is green. Can't you tell? And the guy wrote, no, I'm colourblind. He should have gone to Specsavers. Albeit, when I went to Specsavers, I mean, the answer is which part of his skin, all of it. When I went to Specsavers, they opened this book with like 10 pages with sort of circles and numbers in each with different colours. And the first like 9 pages, I was like, am I a baby? It's 1, 29, 15. And she gets to the last page, the optometrist, and she says, and what about the numbers here? And I look and I say, there are no numbers. And she looks at me like I'm Joe Biden on stage. And she says, really? And I was like, yes, there are no numbers. And she goes, right, you're colourblind. Anyway, forgive me for that little tangent. Please do like, comment, and subscribe if you watch often but aren't subscribed. Give me a bit of positive affirmation for the effort that goes into these videos. I wouldn't say it's a lot of effort, but I enjoy being with you guys anyway. So, keep well, keep safe, and see you soon.